Welcome to the Wednesday, November 16th, 2022 Garrison Board of Education regular workshop meeting. Dusty, will you call the roll, please?
Jocelyn Apicello.
Here.
David Gelber.
Excused?
Madeline Julian.
Excused?
Courtney McCarthy.
Here.
Kent Schott.
Here.
Matthew Spicer.
Here.
Sarah Tormey.
Here. All right, do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, we have, move that closer for you, accept agenda changes. I do have two recommended changes this evening under board communications and presentations. Madeline was not able to join us this evening, so I'd like to move the NYSSBA convention update, as she is our liaison, to our following meeting, Dusty. And then I'm also recommending the sheriff was not able to join us this evening and needs to postpone as well, so we'd like to move that. So those two items will come off, and we will only have one presentation this evening. Okay, anyone else have any other recommended changes? Any other ideas to shorten the meeting? No? Okay. All right. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby accept the agenda as amended. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to President's remarks. I'm going to begin by congratulating our neighboring high school, Haldane. The boys soccer won the state championship. This is their first state championship. I understand it was a very exciting game. I don't know if anybody got to go, but scored in the last minute. So a huge congratulations to Haldane on their achievement. And congratulations to the girls team on making it to, I believe, the final right before the semifinals. Yeah, so congratulations, Haldane. Also on high schools, there is a tour of O'Neill this coming Saturday for anyone who's able to make it, I believe at 10 a.m. All right, let Dusty know if you wish to join. That's all I have. I'm going to give it over to Carl.
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. Just a couple of announcements. First, I just would like to recognize that yesterday, November 15th, was School-Related Professional Recognition Day here in New York. The day was established back in 2007. And here in Garrison, our school-related professional group includes our custodians, our bus drivers, our cleaners, secretaries, payroll clerk, and our classroom aides. These people are invaluable to our district, to the overall efficiency and safety that they provide for our students day in and day out, and we certainly appreciate them on behalf of the entire district. I do want to thank them for their dedication to our school and to our students. Secondly, I also want to just shout out to our colleagues and the principals of both Haldane High School as well as Putt Valley High School and their faculties. They hosted our students for student tours, our 8th grade students. They also provided a parent information night for the 8th grade parents. Now, of course, Putt Valley is a new choice for the first time this year. So I think particularly the parent information sessions were very helpful. That's something we did not do in the past, so our parents really got a good understanding of what each school offers. Additionally, we have on December 6th, our parent night has been scheduled at O'Neill High School. That's recent news, and we will send it out to the parents tomorrow. And then on the 7th, on December 7th, our students will attend a tour of O'Neill High School. With that, they will have seen all 3 districts. They have a lot of information. I want to thank Ms. DiDiego and Mrs. Amig, because any students that struggle with, making a tough decision, there's certainly all 3 schools have so much to offer, but they're helping them guide through that decision-making process and providing support. And please, if you're struggling with the process, of course, just reach out to our staff. We're here to help. Also, here in the Learning Commons, on camera you can't see it, but we probably have approximately 2,000 books that have been shelved here from the previous library space. We ran out of bookshelf space, so we are ordering new shelves for this space. We will add at least 1,000 more books back on our conference day. We did books that were duplicates and triplicates. We did put them out for our teachers to browse through and take them and incorporate them into their classroom libraries. We want to thank the staff for their work on this. It's a big initiative, and we have some more work to do, but it is progressing very nicely. Later in the spring, we'll be looking at classroom libraries. We'll be using some self-audit tools to go through what we have, make sure we have range of reading levels and diversity, as well as different genres and all the things that you need for quality reading programs. And then, of course, with that, the teachers will know what to order for the upcoming school year to enhance their libraries in their classrooms, as well as the library in the Learning Commons. Lastly, I just want to thank the GTA. We're very excited. This year, for the first time ever, we are holding an additional parent-teacher conference. So in the past, we had 3 annually. We did add a 4th day. We also shifted the times with the GTA's support on this from 12 or 12:30, I believe it is, through 6 p.m. So that is to accommodate some parents who might be working and have a little difficulty taking off during the day. They could select a later time slot. So the teachers worked with us on this, and I encourage all parents to take advantage, because our goal is to have a parent-teacher conference for every parent in our district. So again, thank you, and if you haven't signed up, please do so. And that's all I have for this evening.
Thank you, Carl. Do I have any questions for Carl regarding superintendent's remarks? I'm going to move on then to board communications and presentations. Our presentation for this evening is now the New York State 3 through 8 assessments and Regents exam testing data presentation. So Meg, will you join us at the podium, please? Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me tonight. I'll try to make this brief. We put together a presentation for you about how well we performed in our ELA state exams and math exams and our Regents. So you will hear a lot of information tonight about grades 3 through 8 ELA, math, science, and Regents. Next slide. So I think it's really important for us to kind of get a handle as to, who our students are in Garrison. And you can see that primarily most of our students here are coming from white backgrounds and who have access to a lot of resources. Not so many of our students are economically disadvantaged. And our community is relatively white and not as diverse as other communities, especially our local communities like from Peekskill. So our demographics also play a role and play a part in how we look at our data, and also how we drill down to ensure that students with disabilities, for example, are continuing to make progress in comparison to their typical peer groups. So that's the kind of data that we'll be looking at further. So next slide, please. As I take you through the presentation, I want you to just be aware that there's some considerations and implications. So for example, this is the actual first year last year that the students took both parts. So the first 2 years ago, when we came back from the pandemic, the first part of the exam for ELA and math was a multiple choice. And it was primarily a reading comprehension test and, selecting from a group of answers and determining your best answer. Last year, it was the first time where the students were asked to take 2 full parts. So they did take the multiple choice part, and they had to take an extended response part. The extended response really asked kids in our ELA exam to take multiple pieces of texts, being able to compare those texts and get a lot of information and extract evidence to then write extended responses using a lot of text evidence. So it was a ton of skills that the kids were asked to do with not a whole lot of practice because of the nature of, the state of our country and our community with the pandemic. So that test, and even for math, they also had to do a similar thing where they had to write extended responses to explain their mathematical thinking. And again, these are incredibly difficult skills for kids to do that we were asking them to do last year. And it took the kids, I want to say, anywhere between 3 to 5 hours to complete the test. That's how long and grueling these tests were. I did a lot of research to ask local friends, did your kids also take that much time? The endurance that it took for the kids to get through these exams was just like unbelievable. I couldn't believe what I was watching, but they persisted and they completed these tests last year and they did really well, and I'm super proud of the results. Another thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is that the state is actually currently resetting the data. So what that means is previous to COVID, they had a particular growth measure that they were using and comparing progress year after year as students were taking these tests. But because we had the pandemic and there was no state testing for a couple of years, the state had to say, okay, we need to reestablish a new growth measure. So last year's test will now be the new baseline, since last year they were able to take part 1 and part 2. So that now is the baseline, and now for the next 3 years, they're going to be really kind of scrutinizing the test through doing lots of field items. They're going to be sending us some field tests, and our kids will probably take advantage of doing some of these field tests. And it takes 3 years to really refine a test once they establish that new measure. So that's where we are right now, is over the next 3 years, the tests will become more reliable. So each year, we have to just look at these tests. It's not the full picture of what we do here, so it's just a piece. And then it says that we have comparative data from year to year. And I say that it's not valid only because you're going to see a couple of slides that show from 2016 all the way through this year. And it's really hard to compare year to year. You have to be really careful when you're looking at that because, again, you could be looking from 2020 school year to 2021 when it was just multiple choice, and then looking at the following school year where it was a full test. So things like that kind of skew the data. So I just want us to be mindful of that. I also want everybody to keep in mind that although we were open in person during the pandemic still had a huge impact on our community. So 6 feet, the first year when we were back, there was no social interaction. Even with mathematics, where it's an important part of the early phases of mathematics to use hands-on manipulatives, we could not use because everything needed to be sanitized. Everything needed to be, very meticulously handled. So there are, and that's just one piece of it, and I don't want to kind of belabor on that, but that's a serious consideration on how kids learn at the early years is through interaction, through socialization, and through hands-on. So those components were taken from us with the pandemic, and then also going on a virtual platform where it became sort of one-dimensional and not at all, multisensory, which is critical for early years. The pandemic also created a lot of behavioral issues, not necessarily kids acting out, but also just like the mental health and well-being of students and for teachers. I think we spent a lot of time over the past couple of years, and thankfully not this year, with really sort of worrying who's the next person to get COVID. That was one worry. It was always in the back of our minds, and I do believe that it just made the learning community more challenging. Despite us being in person, we still had some challenges. There was a lot of disruption, too, to the learning process over the past couple of years, with kids being having to stay home for periods of time for quarantines, teachers having to stay home for quarantines, a small school closure, but still disruptions, a lot of online virtual learning that had to occur from time to time. So again, we had waves in our community despite being, here in person. Social emotional well-being of students is always something that we have our finger on the pulse at all times. And it still looms, we still are dealing with stressful situations with our kids. And then we can't ignore the fact that during a pandemic, we also had to keep kids learning and moving forward. And our teachers, and I just want to congratulate our teachers who all came here to show support just, to our community and our SRP staff, which we could not have done any of this without our SRP staff as well. But the construction definitely played a significant part. When you create a learning environment for children, people don't recognize that the classroom walls and the actual positioning of desks and all of that matters tremendously with how kids take in information. From putting up displaying bulletin boards and anchor charts and visual cues, sets of directions, which helps kids with executive functioning, checklists, you name it, that plays a significant part. And that was a factor. We also had a lot of boxes and things like that to contend with, but our teachers did and our students did, I think, an incredible job with navigating the construction and the pandemic. And I'm happy to report such, I think, amazing results for the most part with our test results. Next. So how we have been communicating what's been happening with our state test, parents do receive a score report, and the score report really breaks it down, I think, pretty comprehensively with how kids score. So you can see that parents will receive a breakdown whether or not their child met the cut score, and it usually is a point between a score of a 2 and a 3. And if you're a high 2, that you will be considered proficient. And then, of course, naturally, if you're a score of a 4, you are, highly proficient in those skills, whether it's math or literacy. And then it really will break down some of the domains and the skills that the child will struggle in, and then also gives you a comparative on the bottom, comparative among your peer group, and then also a New York comparison. We also communicated, once we got all of these test scores, what I was able to do was I worked with Mr. Yap, our new director, and he put together a slideshow, and he helped to put this together so that this way I can share it with our teachers. So once I got the scores, I had to communicate all of these scores now to our staff and sort of talk through, okay, here's all the trends, and ask them why do you think this occurred this year and last year, and just doing all the comparisons that I'm going to highlight for you tonight. And they were part of that process. I asked them also to weigh in on this, to give me some ideas on things that I may have missed so that I can communicate that to you as well. So next slide. Oop. Can you just pause this for one quick second? I just want to point out that this is just a very short, brief video that explains what the national report card is and how the entire country did nationally on ELA and math. And I wanted to share this with you because it really highlights and shows that the entire country has been struggling tremendously with ELA and math proficiency. We've been struggling nationally for years, but you'll see that every background, every socioeconomic background, whether you are rich or you are disadvantaged economically, it doesn't matter what race you are, you're going to see and hear how profound the impact was that the pandemic had. So, okay, you can press play.
90% of parents think their children read and do math on grade level or better. The latest results of the nation's report card show that most parents are wrong. In 2022, 4th and 8th graders' NAEP achievement fell compared to before the pandemic. Students experienced the steepest drop in the history of the math tests, as students lost nearly as much progress in reading. Everyone's achievement dropped. Boys and girls, white, black, and Hispanic students, students in poverty and wealthy students. Top performers did too. But most of all, students who struggled before the pandemic fell much, much further behind. For them, the pandemic has been more of a tipping point than a single push. Math and reading scores have been falling for years for the students in the lowest 25%. Now, 38% of 8th graders and a quarter of 4th graders can't meet NAEP's lowest benchmark in math. In practical terms, that means, for example, that less than 60% of 4th graders can tell whether a whole number is even or odd. Only 44% of 8th graders can solve a problem using division, down from half in 2019. In more than 20 years, we haven't had this many children struggling this much in math. Students held their ground a little bit more in reading, but you'd still have to go back to 2003 to find more than a third of fourth graders who can't read at even a basic level. They couldn't find the main ideas stated in the text or infer simple things about story characters or plot. More readers are failing in our 8th grade classrooms than at any time since 1994. Among other things, this means that only half of 8th graders can recognize a key question answered in a text. That's significantly fewer than in 2019. What does this mean for our children? For one thing, it means kids are not bouncing back from 2 years of school disruptions and stress. In 2020, 4th graders who took NAEP in 2022 were halfway through 2nd grade when the pandemic hit. 8th graders were still adjusting to middle school. Many attended virtual or socially distanced classrooms for months or even years. And it's clear those disruptions set students back in math and reading. It also means students need major systemic interventions to get back on track. In NAEP surveys, students still feel anxious and their teachers feel overworked. Each state tests students against its own standards, but NAEP uses a single set of standards nationwide. It tests big groups that represent each state and 26 of the nation's biggest city school districts. No one student takes the whole NAEP math or reading test, but taken together, the results show what American students know and can do. To dig into more details about the NAEP results, please see our coverage at educationweek.org.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I know that sounds like pretty doom and gloom. But I really thought it was important to show you that because, thank goodness, like in our community, we are showing, better scores than the national average, but it still makes me so worried just as a nation. It really does. And we are a part of, a small part in Garrison. We're so little, but we're going to be sending our kids out in the world, and this is what we're up against. So it's a challenge. I want to then take you to the next slide is going to explain a little bit more about ELA. And this is the NAEP scores, the data. It's really hard to see, but I'm just going to focus just on the year 2022. So you can see that grade 4 reading is about 35% proficient. 65% of the kids are below reading level. And, it's grade 8. Next slide. Same thing. You can see nationally, 31% are proficient. Nearly 70%, 69% are basic or below in reading for grade 8. And this is nationally. Next slide, please. This is Garrison now. So with Garrison, our ELA performance. So you can see in year 2020, we didn't have any testing. Last year, which is now the baseline year, we have grades 3 through 5. You can see 80% last year, and now 61% for this year. Now looks like we had like a big dip in there, but really, if you really think about it, 2022 is when we added the extended response. So it's not really kind of like a fair comparison to say like, oh my gosh, but 61% is actually really not that bad. And I'm going to show you another graph. Grades 6 through 8, last year, 86%, and that's the multiple choice with the extended response, which was, when I tell you, a 4 to 5 hour test, 85% of those kids scored at the proficient or highly proficient. It's pretty remarkable. We did outstanding, outstanding. Next slide, please. Okay. This slide is just another way just to present the data to you so you can see grades in ELA, the ELA scores for grades 3, 4, and 5. You can start to see it sort of creeping up and how it takes a real big leap in their performance in middle school. So I can hypothesize and say that, the pandemic really hit hard our younger students, and that really tells me that multisensory reading instruction really came to a screeching halt. and that because of the pandemic, that's a necessary skill. Those are necessary components for kids. The middle school level, they had those foundational skills already, and we were able to, leverage off of those foundational skills and sort of launch them and just put it together, and they were able to do that at the middle school. Okay, math. The NAEP data, national, you'll see for grade 4, about 37% are proficient and 63% were basic or below. Grade 8, 27% proficient and 73% were basic or below. That's national. And Garrison. Okay, so here you go. We have 2021, last year, multiple choice, 78%, grades 3 through 5, did really well. 2022, you'll see that little dip, but that's that extended response, which we would expect. Grades 6 through 8, 41% last year, and then we're increased at 48%, so there's some steady growth there. Next slide. Another way to look at this, if you look at grade 3, you can see that when I was really kind of dissecting and looking into this data, we had unbelievable scores. The kids did really, really well. And then you can see the dip in 7th grade, and then it kind of goes right back up in 8th grade. So there's, we can talk about like why perhaps this occurred. Kids, when they are younger, there's those foundational skills that they were building, and when Ms. Stevenson gave that test to backfill whatever they missed using our new program, so you're at the entry point with the new Envisions math program in 3rd grade did not necessarily maybe require as much backfilling for those foundational skills, and she was able to really kind of push those kids. So Marge, all of those teachers that are sitting here did such a nice job with preparing those kids. Sarah was able to launch them, and they did really well. So what starts to happen is when you start that, now you have grade 4 math, you have a new math program last year, it's a new entry point for a new math program, and then you have to backfill even more. So that's a lot of backfilling that a teacher has to do to kind of close that gap. So year after year, so when you have an entry point in 7th grade with a new math program, look at all the years that you have to backfill. It's a spiraling program, so there's so many skills and vocabulary that needs to be developed and practiced and assessed and analyzed, and then, to kind of inform your teaching. But that's it's a daunting task when you're starting a new program in 7th grade to do all that backfill. Then Math 8, we had like a nice uptick there, which is great. Science 4 and 8, you can see, next slide, 100% proficiency, grade 4. In grade 8, we did not have anybody take the state grade 8 science. We had everybody taking the living environment Regents. It was our first year doing it, really raising the bar for our kids, and the kids did fantastic. Next slide. The Regents. Okay, really amazing. We have in algebra, 100% of our kids passed, and 18% passed with mastery. Living environment, you'll see we have 93% of our students passed, but 50% of them were mastery level. It's just beyond excellent. I'm just so proud. We have math supports. Really, that should be saying, let me see. Can you go to the next slide? I'm sorry. Oh, you know what I did? I changed it, but you didn't have the version. That's okay, I could speak to it. Okay. For ELA supports, we have our balanced literacy program. So in balanced literacy, and I think from years prior, I think there has been like a heavy emphasis on the teacher college and the college workshop model. And phonics and the science of reading and the multisensory reading instruction is something that is like a necessary component to really balance out. So balanced literacy really means that you are paying close attention to the multisensory reading portion K through 2. And then as the kids get older, grades 3 through 8, you're really asking kids to, read for information now. You're not learning to read, but now you're reading for information, extracting information, and then what are you going to do with that information? And how are you going to communicate using that information? So we're really now looking at how are we going to balance out the K through 2. Our last professional development, that's what we did. We sat around in my office and we just were like reading articles about Lucy Calkins' the teacher workshop, and then just having conversations. What do we need to do to balance out our program so that we're getting more phonics in there? The emphasis on multisensory reading instruction and how important that is, and what are the ingredients of multisensory reading instruction. So we're having lots of conversation around that. Leveled classroom libraries for all grades. I repeat that often. You're going to hear me say that because this is something that's critical. Kids need access in their classrooms to high quality books that they can read, and they need practice, not just books that are, too high for them that they can't access where it's frustrational level, books that they can actually sit, enjoy, and practice and read. So whether it's phonics books so that they're practicing decoding, or whether it's practicing their comprehension through using quality literature. So there's the tools for teaching multisensory reading instruction, and then there's quality literature. So that's how you balance it out, and leveled libraries need to include both. Universal diagnostic screenings. We're using FNP, which stands for the Fuentes and Pinnell, which is a diagnostic tool that kind of really delves right into dissect where a student is reading, and how their reading comprehension is, and how strong their reading comprehension is, how their fluency looks, how their vocabulary is measuring up. Is it grade level vocabulary? And how their written expression looks. So we have the FNP, we have STAR reading, which is administered 3 times also. So we use these benchmarks and the reading benchmarks to inform our instruction and to decide who is then going to be going into RTI. We talk a lot about RTI because it's a robust program that supports our kids. We have an interventionist, and our special education teachers also join in the efforts to provide remediation on skills that we glean from these assessments. And they go in and they just remediate and then assess, we analyze the data, and then we make decisions whether or not a student can be released from RTI. We expect that kids are going to be in RTI for roughly 6 to 8 week cycles. We progress monitor, benchmark them again, have a conversation, and the goal is to get them out and back into, the tier 1. Tier 2 and tier 3 would be pull out with your interventionist. Those are important programs that we need to keep in place. We're going to be also revising our report cards. I'm going to be pulling together a committee sometime over the spring, and I shared this already with our classroom teachers, that the report cards are pretty outdated. And what we'd like to do is start aligning our report cards to the next gen standards. And so that's a huge undertaking. And once we do that, and you're starting to really making reference to all of those standards on a routine basis, and you're assessing kids using that report card, we're going to start to really see our kids move in the right direction, even though they already are moving in that direction, but it's just going to get stronger and better. Also, we have data analysis, which we talked about, using data to identify the needs and any programmatic adjustments. So again, looking at data and saying, let's talk about our balanced literacy program. Are they really balanced? How often are you doing phonics? Are you doing all the components of multisensory reading instruction? Or, do we need to add more? So those are program adjustments that we're doing. And then using a unified data analysis platform for next year. So this is something that James will be able to speak more to because he's investigating it. We use Renaissance, which is a big platform, that STAR data, that assessment that we use for math and ELA, and it gives us really good data. But there's lots to STAR Renaissance that we can just use, I think, as a full platform, so we're not using data from various sources. It just will come from one platform. I know I'm not explaining it perfectly, but I'm still learning about this one particular platform, but I think it's going to be a helpful tool for next year. Okay, is that it? Oh, math. Math, we're in year 2 of implementation of Envisions. And then, year 2, I think it's going pretty well. We have some professional development that we're still going to be booking for this year to assist with the implementation of the math. Again, we're going to be revising the report cards to align with Math Next Gen standards. The universal diagnostic screening, there are lots of screeners within the Envision's math program. They use those screeners, and we also use the STAR Math. And we take those and we look for common themes so that we can get in and do some remediation in RTI classes. And then we are also offering some after-school math support that Mr. Roman is hosting. But Mr. Roman also hosts every day during his lunch period, because he eats lunch with the kids almost all the time. He's so incredibly dedicated, and and the kids just come in and they need a lot of math support and they ask questions, and sometimes it's just a dip in and dip out. But he's there to help the kids, for kids who cannot stay after school. And then the data analysis to identify needs and programmatic adjustments again. And then again, the data analysis. One of the things that's not up on here, and it's a huge important factor that I added just 10 minutes ago, which didn't show up here, but we added time to the periods, which is very important. We're gonna be gaining, I think, like 27 instructional hours in the year for all our core subjects. That is huge. So I think that's going to be a real game changer in moving our kids just forward. So I'm pretty excited to see, how it's all going to play out. So I think that might be it, Dusty. That's it. Okay. Thank you. All right. Questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ivey. Questions, anyone? Kent, go ahead, please. Courtney.
When you're looking at the grade performance, is there consistency year over year? So like if grade 7 struggled this year, 4 years ago, was that grade also below the other grades? Like, do you see it kind of roll along by grade in such a small school? Or do you see a difference when they hit certain areas? I'm just curious, like, how much can be done to improve those grades that struggle a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to go back and look at all those trends from 7th grade and see how they were doing from year after year. I mean, the supports that we have in place right now, especially with RTI, we had kids in there that were really surprised to be in RTI. But we said it's necessary. You have to. It's only going to be a blast. We're just going to get in and remediate and get out. And I think it's important to destigmatize some of these supports that we have in place. That's really huge, because some kids we're trying to normalize it and destigmatize it. But RTI is, if you look at research, it's one of the strongest things that you can do in a school is have a full RTI robust program that is really analyzing and looking at data. And that's what's really going to close the gap, is putting in those supports and identifying where those weak spots are.
I guess just trying to understand the data a little bit more, or at least how much I should take away from these things in such a small school.
The sampling is small.
Should we expect, because grade 3 was so strong this year, or the lower grades are so strong, that we should see that in 3 or 4 years in middle school?
I think, if you look at the third grade math looks super strong right now. I would expect, we have, I think, a phenomenal team here and a great math program, that I would predict that grade, that cohort, should stay, I think, relatively strong. We have what? Can you go to the graph, the bar graph? 76% of them are already super strong. So my hope is that they're going to stay on that trajectory. And I think they will.
So I guess my question would be, is it at least in a couple of years, is it better to analyze that data and say, okay, Math 3 has stayed consistently at this level, or we're seeing dips in this grade because it's such small? Because when you look at the overall numbers, it's like, well, we dipped. Well, is that more an impact of the individual grades that maybe we expected that versus not?
It could be, the makeup of grades looks different. We actually talked about that today. You could have a strong cohort one year and then the following year not as strong, just for a variety of reasons. And our sampling is so small, so it's really hard, because if you look at some of the data too for 8th grade, I think it was, I can't remember which grade it was, but I think there were only 10 kids who took the test. Because you have opt-outs. That's another factor. So not everybody's taking it. And then one year, and then next year, we might have all the kids take it. Elementary, you have almost full participation in elementary. Middle school, it drops off. There's so many opt-outs in middle school. And that really skews the data.
Does that answer your question?
No, I think it might be useful in the future to maybe look at grades over time.
Yeah.
Just to get a better indication rather than
Yeah.
the overall numbers, just because
Absolutely.
you're right. I think, if the third grade's exceptionally strong, does that mean that, what does that mean?
It's a strong cohort,
Yeah.
or, I know. Mm-hmm. I think it's because we just have amazing.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
I
I
mean-
just think we're just amazing, that's why.
So actually, opt-out numbers was my first question, which you pretty much just covered.
Yeah, elementary, a lot of participation. You see the drop off big time in middle school.
Yeah, who gives middle schoolers opinions of what to do? And I know you probably don't have the breakdown of information, but did you look at the breakdown of gender of these test results? And-
So
or
that
did
is
you
going to be
see
like
any-
another deeper dive to
Yeah.
look at gender, to look at, students with disabilities, to look at that is another deep dive that now that I have James here with me and he's so great with data and breaking all these things down for me, that's going to be like a great thing for us to do. And I will be able to get you that information.
Great. So my other question is about the actual numbers. So taking 8th grade
Yep.
for the Regents,
Yep.
what they all passed 100% proficiency, but on the state test they came in at 59% proficiency. How does so these are two tests that obviously Garrison School is not designing, but how do these two tests align? How do they conflict? How do they align with our Envisions program? Which one are we teaching towards? Or sort of
so-
asking a very broad question,
Right.
but there's a big
So the
difference
re-
between 59%
yeah, I mean, the
and
Regents,
100%.
The Regents class, that's a high school. That's the high school level course. They're already a year advanced. The Math 8 is math using next gen standards. Our Envision Math program, so the Envision Math program actually has an algebra course that fits the algebra 1 year advance. So it addresses that high school level course. And then the Math 8, Envisions offers the Math 8. And same thing for 7th grade accelerated. So we have 7th grade accelerated math offered through Envisions, and then Math 7, which is non-accelerated. So the Envisions program does a great job with teasing that out. And then it is aligned to the next gen standards. So Mr. Roman, who teaches the algebra class, teaches his content and what he needs to teach for that particular grade. That's aligned, and he does the same for his Math 8. Now on the test, there weren't a lot of kids who took Math 8, so it's a small sampling. So then and that's why you look at it and it's like, but if I mean, I'll get you the data for that, but how many kids? But it's, I think, less than 10 kids took that test.
So the Regents kids didn't take this test. They're
I
not a
think
part
last
of
year
it.
we had 17, exactly. They didn't take it. The 17 kids took the algebra, and which we had a big cohort who took algebra, which I'm psyched that I was so excited that we had a large group, and they all passed. So that was really nice to see that.
The breakdown, I think, was about 2/3 of our students took the high school algebra
Yep.
Regents course.
Yes.
And about 1/3, maybe a little more, were in Math 8,
I
and they
see.
took separate exams.
So they're not taking.
They're not, no,
Whole eighth
Math
grade
8,
is not
yes.
taking both the
Cor-
state test
correct.
and the
No.
Regents.
When you take the
Thank you.
Regents, yes.
That makes it
Yes.
much
And,
more clear.
and,
I'm
and
sorry.
then consider
I'm like-
opt-outs, Courtney, so the numbers may not even, that 1/3 may not, maybe out of that, only 60 or 70% actually took the Math 8.
Exactly.
If you're looking at that statistic.
No, that's a
So-
long-term issue we've had at Garrison of
Yes.
trying to trying to get information from these numbers, from this data, except for the fact that, you're looking at sometimes 6 kids.
Yes.
And, that's not a true
That's
representation
why
of the
it's
entire
really,
grade.
yeah.
My last question is, which is not specific to us, but a question as admin. Do schools get to give feedback to the state to say, hey, we've got these young kids sitting, some kids are
Oh,
sitting
yes.
for 4.5 hours, and that's ridiculous, and when
Yes.
you're designing the next test, could you not?
Yes.
I don't know if they listen, but
They should, because what we saw last year was really upsetting. And and again, the kids didn't have the endurance. So now they have stamina, they have endurance. So I'm expecting that this year is going to be
a
different.
ridiculous amount of time to ask
But
a
I have to
child.
tell you, just looking at the test and what they're asking kids to do, developmentally, I'm like floored. It's really, really hard, very challenging. But I think overall, I think we did really well, considering.
So a follow-up question to that. Do you get to see the test after the fact, and do the
Yes.
teachers to see
Yes.
what they're testing on in terms
Yes.
of, are there elements that aren't in our curriculum because we follow the Lucy Calkins reading and writing program? Are there things we need to add or?
Well, I think, for
Increase?
middle school, you can see that the kids they're really kind of off the charts in middle school right now. So whatever is going on in middle school is working and working incredibly well. Not that I'm saying that isn't room for improvement, of course there is. But I definitely think at the elementary level, especially, K through 2, K through 3, I think that balancing out the reading experience for kids is going to be, I think, our next step. I think really having an emphasis on phonics instruction, I think, is necessary at the younger age. And we've talked about this, as a team, and I think and vocabulary development. I think vocabulary development is huge. Content vocabulary, building background knowledge, building fluency. All of these things are just going to, strengthen their literacy skills at the elementary level.
Thank you.
You're
Any
welcome.
other questions regarding the data? All right. And is it all available online now through New York SED? Have they posted it all?
Not
I haven't
the scores.
seen it yet,
No,
so I
I
think that's
tried
where we'll
looking
get the
because I
gender
wanted to get
breakdowns.
comparatives. They didn't post any of the scores, the local scores, because I was curious, how did we measure
I
up?
saw it in one local
Yeah.
article, but I haven't seen a lot about it yet in terms of
Yeah.
comparisons. between
Couldn't find
districts.
it.
I would say, though, again, it's very hard to compare if you're looking at district by district on those rankings. Everyone should be mindful that Garrison doesn't have a high school, so when they're taking into account these
Yep.
larger districts, it can look very skewed
Exactly.
on those very generalized lists.
Totally. Yep.
Was my basic reading of it.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
time, and
Thank
thank
you
the
so much.
teachers for.
Yes. Reach out to
Very
me if
good
you have any.
results.
Yes. I'm very pleased, and thanks to this crew right here. They're amazing. Thank you.
Okay. If anyone wants to dig down further, they will at some point post all of the results by gender, race, and all of that. We could spend a lot of time on that if we wish. All right, that brings us next to the NYSSBA Area 10 Director election. So NYSSBA is running an election for someone to represent our local area. This is somebody who would advocate on behalf of a number of districts, and Dusty, jump in here if I am incorrect at any point. This isn't something we've looked at in the past necessarily, but I think is important for us to participate in, given that we really need, it would benefit our district to see some changes in Albany, specifically in relations to finance, and having someone who can advocate for us will help. So you saw two candidates are running. They had their position statements, their bios, their resumes. It is Cheryl Brady and Debbie Gatti. So if we want to have some discussion, thoughts on if you have a preference as to which candidate, we can then vote this evening. Should we come to a consensus? And Dusty will send our results in on behalf of our district. So I'll open it up to everybody if you had any particular thoughts on which of these, both very qualified individuals, would best represent our particular needs as a school district in Garrison.
Since we're missing two people, should we just email you our vote?
We have to vote on it in public tonight in order to get it in.
Okay.
Because it has to be done as a public vote, as a resolution, and then Dusty needs to file it by Friday.
So it can't be like a secret ballot.
We can't secret ballot this one, no. We can't secret ballot anything, to be clear. We never secret ballot, right?
Well,
Team?
this one just seems like, I don't
Yeah.
know these people, and I'm going to choose one, and it seems like unfair and also weird, right? Right.
Right.
And so
As
how
a
do
body,
we,
yeah.
is this
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
5, some,
Unfortunately, this is our last opportunity.
right, right.
Do you have an opinion, Sarah?
I thought Cheryl Brady has a lot of experience with school boards, and I really liked her position statement in terms of the things she looks at. She has, but then again, I thought Debbie had great fiscal experience as well, having been a town clerk. So I was a little torn, I have to say. Cheryl Brady is from White Plains, the city of White Plains. It's more in our area. Debbie's in Rockland County. I don't know how much that should play into it. I think we really need to think about, what are we, if we advocate to NYSSBA, what are we advocating for? Based on our previous conversations, I think we're pretty clear on the things that are important to us as a district and what would have an impact. I leaned a little bit towards Cheryl Brady, and I don't want to say anything negative about Debbie. I think she would be fantastic as well, should anyone else, but I think she would be a strong voice for us and certainly has a lot of enthusiasm for school board. She has done an amazing amount of additional learning in this area and shown really, I mean, just reading from her bio, the amount of time and energy she's put into volunteering for school boards and learning about serving on boards, what school districts need. That's what she's spending her vacation time from her actual job doing, and her actual job is in education as well. So that really stood out to me as an advocate for education in a lot of different areas. Her bio didn't strike me as being, pigeonholed as only one issue. And we have a number of issues that we're interested in, though fiscal does rise to the top of my list every time. If we could raise that 4% cap, be helpful. Raise the tax cap, maybe special ed. I have a dream list of things I would like, so.
She wrote a longer statement.
You give points for length?
I mean, it is hard to get a full sense based on the statements.
She was also supported by our neighboring district, Haldane, as well, if there is, solidarity in the area.
I agree with you with everything you just said. Again, nothing against either one of them, but given that this is all the information we have, I would suggest a vote for Cheryl Brady.
Okay. I'm going to drop her name in. I'm going to read this resolution. Be resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby casts its vote to elect Cheryl Brady as the NYSSBA Area 10 Director for a 2-year term commencing on January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2024. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays, abstentions. Okay, thank you all. We look forward to hopefully working with Cheryl, should the other districts agree. And I want to thank both of them for volunteering. This is a volunteer position on top of their other volunteer positions. It's pretty amazing. All right, we now come to public comment. Public comment is intended for members of the community to speak openly and voice concerns. In accordance with Policy 1510 of the Garrison Union Free School District, any person wishing to speak shall comply with all provisions of this policy. Comments about specific school personnel or individual students is a violation of board policy. Concerns regarding students or personnel should be discussed privately with the superintendent or appropriate administrator. Comments should be limited to 3 minutes, and speakers are asked to conduct themselves in a respectful manner. The board will listen to comments but will not engage in dialogue. Any necessary follow-up will be noted and provided through the appropriate channel. Members of the public wishing to comment during board meetings are asked to place their name and town of residence on the sign-in sheet. Commenters will be invited to the podium to address the board. I have my sign-in sheet here. There's no one on it yet. Okay. I'll go ahead and close this public comment section, but if you change your mind, there's another one coming up. All right, we're going to move on to accept the minutes. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby accept the minutes of the regular meeting of October 26, 2022 as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved. Seconded.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions or thoughts on the minutes as presented? Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays, abstentions. We'll move on now to the financial reports. The treasurer's reports and claim audit report. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District does hereby accept the Treasurer's Report for October 2022 and the Claims Audit Report for October 2022 as presented. May I have a motion, please? Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding the Treasurer's Report, Appropriation Status Report, Revenue Status Report, or the Internal Claims Audit Reports, findings and summaries? Joe, did you have any comments on these? Anything exciting you want to point out? I saw that 180,000 came in.
Yes.
That's
So,
noted as revenue. That means we have that money,
yes,
right?
We did get the money that was pledged to us from Senator Skoufis, so it is here.
It's great.
It's good.
All right, any other questions, comments? We go ahead and move to a vote then. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Right. We have the CSE, CPSE recommendations. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District approved the Committee on Special Education, CSE, and the Committee on Preschool Special Education, CPSE, recommendations and student placements. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Abstentions? That brings us to the personnel consent agenda. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, does hereby approve the items of the personnel consent agenda as presented. May I have a motion, please?
Second.
Thank you. Hey, Carl, do you want to speak to a few of these?
Just briefly, Coach Vorliotis is returning for the 7th year as our modified boys basketball coach. He's done good work for us, so we're happy to have him back. You may wonder why we don't have a girls modified coach. We did, but the person, for personal reasons, needed to withdraw. So we've been posting. Mr. Beckley is actively looking. We're hoping to have someone secured shortly, but coaches are in high demand, and there is a real shortage. So I will keep you posted on that progress. The next one, McKinney-Vento Liaison for Homeless Children and Youth. All districts are required to have one point person in this role. It used to be our school psychologist, but this year with a part-time school psychologist, we've decided to turn it over to our school guidance counselor, who I have no doubt Mr. Diego will handle the responsibility. It is rare, of course, in our small district that we do have homeless child, but it is possible. So we will make sure Mr. Diego is supported in that role, and she welcomes taking on the responsibility. We thank her. Lastly, yearbook co-advisors. This is a big job, and we just want to say thank you, Ms. Ricky, Ms. Gargaro, for your willingness to take on this added responsibility. So we do recommend them for yearbook co-advisors.
Thank you, Carl. Any questions? We'll go ahead and move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Thank you. Next up, we have new business. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, does hereby approve the new business items as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved. Seconded.
Thank you. Carl, do you want to speak to any of these?
Sure. There is an MOA with our GTA, the Teachers Association. This is really something that they've requested for our district to take out contributions for the teachers union, the statewide union. So there's no expense to the district. It is a pretty simple procedure. We're happy to do it for them, and it supports a lot of good work that the NYSSBA teachers union does. So the next one, I will turn over to Joe, a corrective action in response to the audit.
There's a corrective action that is recommended for the board to adopt. There's 2 items that were raised in the management letter that they asked us to address. One has to do with the separation of the ability to add a vendor and issue payments or initiate payments. So we're basically changing the access for one employee so that one employee can add vendors and a different one is the one that enters payments. So that's the main corrective action. And The other item that's on the list is that there's a fund balance in the school lunch fund, but that will continue until we're running a program.
Any questions or comments on the corrective action or the MOA? Okay, all in favor? Please say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Brings us to our second public comment of the evening. I'm not going to read my paragraph again, but I still have my sign-up sheet. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on then to board member comment and other discussion. Jocelyn? Courtney?
No.
Kent?
No.
Matt?
Happy Thanksgiving.
That was a good one. I have no further comment, but happy Thanksgiving. All right, we move to enter executive session. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby enters into executive session for the purpose of receiving legal counsel, discussing the employment history of a particular person, and discussing collective negotiations with the SRP bargaining unit pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law. May I have a motion, please? Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays, abstentions. Okay. We will adjourn from executive session without any further action being taken. Thank you.